Hello, welcome or welcome back to the Yarn and Yarns YouTube channel. My name is Angela and all of the places you can find me should be linked in the description box below this video. And here on the channel you'll find me chatting about my adventures in knitting, spinning, crochet and weaving, all of the fibre related things. Welcome, how are you? I feel a little bit out of practice. It's been a couple of weeks since I've sat down to record. I had a little bit of an unintentional recording break, but I'm back today to chat to you about all of the things that I worked on and I finished in February. It's a rather gloomy day here, mid-March in Wales today, so I have decided to take advantage of the fact that I've got the house to myself for a couple of days. It's just me and the cat. James is away on a little work trip, so I've started up a fire and I thought I'd just take over our living room and record to you here instead of upstairs in the craft attic. Not sure if I will regret this, whether I'll get too hot sat so close to the fire. But hey, we're doing it for the cosy ambience, and I'll try and keep my eye on how things are going and might have to stop and poke and prod the fire every now and then. Anyway, in today's video I have some knitting, finished objects, works in progress. I have some weaving and I have some spinning to share with you. And then at the end, if we have time, I have a little acquisitions segment too. Fire's a little grumpy about that. Where shall I start? Well, I think I'll start with knitting today. I've got quite a few finished objects to share with you, including the sweater that I am wearing today, which is the Ursa pattern, a pattern by Jacqueline C. Slack. And I cast this on, not for this time's 12 cast-ons, but for the round before that as one of my 12 projects. It's a crop sweater. I'll try and put some pictures or some video in of me wearing the sweater. I'm not sure if it's finished yet, and I'll explain a little bit more as we go along. A bulky or a chunky weight sweater, it's cropped length, and in the front it's got a lovely sort of half brioche detail, and I have woven all but one of the ends in. I've got one end down here, just still sticking out. Don't know how well you'll be able to see that. Because I may be ripping this out and adding a little bit more length to the sweater. I knit mine from a now discontinued yarn, which was Sublime Willow, I believe it was called. And it's a lovely sort of tweed effect yarn. It's one of those very airy, I think they're called blown yarns, where they basically blow the fibre into a tube. So it's a very airy, light yarn. And this is really light to wear, but really nice and warm too. It's perfect for this time of year, this sort of transitional time of year where it's starting to warm up a bit, but it's not really warm yet. There's still chilly days, and yeah, this has been keeping me nice and snuggly and warm for the last couple of days. However, as I said, I'm not sure if this is finished because I think I might need to add a teeny tiny little bit of length to this sweater. I posted a picture of it on me on Instagram the other day, and lots of people commented to say how nice they thought the length was, and it is to a certain extent. So as I said, I try and put some footage in of me sort of wearing this and showing it off, just to explain a little bit about what I sort of mean when I say this. So when I first put the sweater on and it sits here on my shoulders as it's sitting as I'm wearing it, it's a really nice length that comes down to about my waist, which is roughly where I would want it to be. However, as soon as I start moving and doing things, it works back on my shoulders slightly and basically comes to the point where it literally is just covering below my bust line, which is a little bit too short. I can probably demonstrate now that if I lift my arm up, you can see that's rising like right above my bust line and it's getting really short. And then once you put your arm sort of back down, if you've reached for something or lifted something, it sort of literally sits there. And I think you can probably see as I'm talking and chatting, this sort of half brioche section is working its way up, and I need to keep sort of tugging it down slightly just to keep it sat in position, like the length position that I would want to wear it in. But I think that will be easily resolved by just adding a couple more rows to the bottom of this sweater. So I left that end sort of unwoven in. I'm not sure how easy this yarn is going to be to unpick, but having worn this around the house for a couple of days, I really do think I need to add a couple of extra rows to this. I knit it as to pattern. I put in the bust darts too, which theory should help with the problem of things riding up at the front. There are great instructions in the pattern for how to do that, but I'm not sure whether I just maybe mismeasured myself or whether I'm just slightly longer in the torso. But yeah, overall a really lovely pattern, and I enjoyed knitting it. And it really, in the scheme of things, although it's been on my needles for quite some time, in the scheme of things, the number of hours put into knitting this really wasn't a lot. It's just, you know me, I have lots of things on the go and I never tend to concentrate on just one thing at a time. So if you've been watching the channel for the whole year, you'll know that I've been rolling the dice to help me choose which projects to work on throughout the month, and this was the project that I chose when the dice prompted me to pick a sweater project. I actually have 3 other knitted projects that I finished in February to share with you. These are all ones that hopped on and off the needles during the month of February, so you won't have seen them before, and they could all count for the second of the prompts that the dice threw up for me for my February making, which was to cast on something new. So first up, I have been continuing to work on my little goal of making at least one charity hat, and I continued to work on my snap hats. If you watched my wrap up for January, you'll know how much I enjoyed knitting the snap hats, and I had gathered myself a little pile of leftovers and mini skeins, and I just continued to work through that little pile until they were finished. And so in February I finished 2 more snap hats. So this is a lovely pattern by Tin Can Knits, and you basically are knitting a very simple beanie pattern, but you're holding together several strands of yarn, and there are directions in the pattern which help you to decide, depending on what weight of yarns you are using, it guides you as to how many strands you need to hold together. For the majority of mine, I was holding 4 strands of fingering weight 4-ply yarn together to make these hats. So yeah, 2 more snap hats off the needles. While we're on the subject of hat knitting, I want to say a huge thank you to the lovely Susan, who is part of our lovely community here, who reached out to me and said that she had a whole bunch of these faux fur pom-poms that she wasn't going to use, and would I want them for my hats. So she very kindly, these are just a couple of them, sent me this whole bag. There's loads. You can cram a lot of pom-poms into a bag. So they, oops. They're alive. They're like any Star Trek fans out there. They're a bit like tribbles. They seem to multiply and get out of hand very quickly. Oops. Woo. Definitely tribble-like on the floor. So thank you so much to Susan for that. That was so kind and generous of you. And I'm going to be going through, now that I've shown the pom-poms off on the channel here, I'm going to be going through and adding some of these to my snap hats. I'm going to try and match up some of the colours. Thank you so much for that kind gift, Susan. They'll add like a really, these are going to add a really nice finishing touch to my snap hats. The other year-long make-along that I have decided to participate in is Imagined Landscapes Year of the Gnomes. So if you followed the channel for any length of time, you'll know that I've been a big fan of these lovely little patterns for the past couple of years, and on the whole I tend to try and use my hand spun yarn because I think it adds a nice bit of character to these little gnomes. And this year Sarah Shearer, who is the brains behind Imagined Landscapes, has launched a make along where you basically just knit 12 gnomes throughout the year. She has 12 gnome patterns released, but you can knit, if you only own one of the patterns, you can knit 12 versions of the same gnome if you want to do one a month as the year progresses. So my February gnome came to life quite recently, and I believe, if I remember correctly, this is the Adventuresome gnome pattern. And so here is my February gnome. And for a change, I didn't actually use any of my hand spun yarn in this little gnome. What I did instead is I had a beautiful little collection of mini skeins that had been kindly gifted to me by the lovely Angela, who is one half of Attic Spin Dye. Angela and Andy have been fabulous support for the podcast and lovely friends to me over the last couple of years, and they've sent me a few things to give away on the channel and a few little gifts for myself. And last year they sent 3 mini skeins which just look perfect together in a little set. So I decided to keep them, and I'd always planned to make a gnome with them but never quite got round to it. So my little February gnome is made from 3 beautiful mini skeins from Attic Spin Dye. They were sent to me as a lovely gift with no expectation of me sort of sharing or chatting, but I will link to their shop below. One more finished object to share with you, and this is actually the project that I officially cast on, or was my first thought when I got that prompt to cast on something new. I needed to make a pair of socks, or I wanted to make a pair of socks for James's dad, whose birthday is coming up at the beginning of April. And I've knitted a few pairs of socks for James's dad in the past. I wasn't quite sure if he was wearing them or not, so this past year I didn't make any, but when James's mum and dad were visiting this Christmas, both mum and dad remarked that I hadn't made any knitted socks for them. So I took that as a cue that they wanted some more, and so I decided to knit up a pair for dad for his birthday, and these are they. So this, I believe, although I'm not 100% sure, is yarn from Opal. I know that's a fact. What I'm not sure on is about the range. I think this is one of the Opal Ocean colourways now, which is sadly discontinued. It was a beautiful range which included lots of blues and greys inspired by the ocean, as per the name, and I lost the label for this ages ago. It was one that I had as shop stock, and I think the label got broken in transit, and sometimes it happens and I just stick it back together with a little bit of sticky tape, but on this occasion the label just went astray, and so I decided to keep the ball and add it to my stash and knit it up at some point. And I decided that this would be the perfect skein to use for dad for his birthday socks this year. I always knit a 3x1 rib for James's dad's socks. James's dad has some issues with his ankles sometimes and gets a little bit of swelling every now and then, so I try to stick with some sort of ribbed pattern so that they can sort of expand and contract for him as needed. And so yes, the whole leg and the top of the foot is in 3x1 rib, and then of course the bottom of the foot is plain, just a standard heel flap and gusset, but I did the Eye of Partridge sort of slip stitch pattern. So yes, they are my 4 finished knitted objects. Took a little pause there to throw another log on the fire. I could see out the corner of my eye on the screen it was starting to die down a bit. So next project, this is my one and only project that I knitted on during February that I didn't get finished, and this was the project that I picked when I rolled the colourwork prompt, or the dice picked colourwork for me, and I decided to work on my Astravest, which is a pattern by Amber O'Brien. I am knitting mine from 2 of my hand spun yarns. The first is the very first, and so far only, fleece to yarn project that I've actually completed. I've got a couple of others in progress, but this is the only one that I completed. And this was a fleece that was a gift from my lovely friend Charlie, and it is a Jacob Ryland cross. And I'm pairing that with a sort of lovely autumnal kind of colour fibre that I fractally spun, and this was fibre that was gifted to me again by another member of our lovely community here, Kathy, and I spun up this yarn from the fibre that she gifted to me. And this was one of my 12 cast-ons from this year, and let me try and find, where have I put my marker? It was the project that I cast on day 11. So when you last saw this, it was just a little bit of brown ribbing. And right down here, you can see where the progress marker is where I got to on the first day. Throughout February, I managed to make quite some progress on this, and I have actually worked, it's a little bit screwed up because it's been shoved in my bag for the last couple of weeks, but I actually worked up to the point where I think I'm going to split and start working front and back. So this pattern is worked bottom up in the round to the point where you split for the sleeves, and then you work it flat for the back and the front. I ended up actually adding some extra length to this vest. So where you see this lovely marker here, that was where the pattern said to knit to, but I've added another couple of pattern repeats to lengthen my vest slightly. Again, the pattern is a cropped design, but I had a particular length in mind that I wanted my vest to get to. So I did some calculations and I've added an extra couple of pattern repeats. I was quite sad to put this away for March actually, because I really want to see how this turns out, and if there is any way possible for me to work this back into my making for April, I certainly will. But this month in March, I'm really concentrating on a test knit sweater that I committed to do, so I couldn't really pick another sweater project. Oh, it's getting really hot by the fire now. I'm glad I haven't got too much left to chat to you about. If I'm getting pinker and pinker as the video goes on, then we can blame that. But it's making this room lovely and warm, so I'm not complaining. I'm just really sat a little bit closer than I would normally. Okay, on to a little bit of weaving now. The final prompt that the dice threw up for me for February was to do a bit of weaving. My main goal was to try and finish a piece of woven cloth that I had on my rigid heddle loom for far too long, much longer than it should have been on there, and I am happy to say that I did manage to achieve that. And again, this has got a little bit screwed up because I'm not very nice to my things, I'm not very careful with them. I haven't yet woven in the sort of extra ends that I need to weave in, but here is my piece of clasp weft woven cloth. I used sock yarn, some opal sock yarn for the warp of this, a grey and a pink, and then I used my own hand spun yarn, and this was yarn that I spun up from fibre that I purchased from Feather and Fleece here in the UK, lovely indie dyer. For such a tiny bit of cloth, realistically, I used up all of my hand spun. I've got a teeny tiny little bit of pink left, but I ran out of the grey, so I stopped where I did. This was on the loom for months, which is just crazy. I just kept putting it off, and it's a slightly slower for me technique because it's the first time I was attempting to do the clasp weft. I think the issue with my slightly bigger loom, I've got two rigid heddle looms now, but the slightly wider one, which is the one that I wove this one on, I don't really have a good corner of the house set up for it, because with my smaller rigid heddle I can sit on the floor and use it, but with this one it's slightly too wide to comfortably sit on the floor, which means I need to sit up and prop it up against the table. It usually requires me to jiggle things round because usually on my table upstairs I've got my drum carder or my blending board. When I want to sit down to weave on this particular loom, it usually involves me clearing away stuff to make space for it, which just gives me all of that glimmer that I need to procrastinate, that little excuse that I need not to sit and do it. But anyway, I'm pleased with how this piece of cloth turned out. I was thinking about turning it into a cushion, but I'm not sure it turned out as big as I was hoping that it would. So I might be rethinking that one. It's actually quite a nice size to potentially make just a nice shoulder bag or something with it. So I'm going to sit and think on that for a little while. Also for weaving this month, I have a few little sort of woven pieces to share with you. I haven't brought down all of the little pieces that I made. I did embark on the 100 days project. So if you're not familiar with this, the 100 days project is basically a thing that happens every year where a bunch of creative folks commit to doing a particular thing for 100 days. And I thought it was a lovely idea. I've never done it before, and I thought I'd get on board this year and attempt to do 100 days of creative weaving. I set a little goal for myself in that I wanted to use my hand spun yarn in all of my woven pieces that I created. Didn't have to be entirely hand spun, but just to use at least a little bit of my hand spun yarn in each of the pieces that I worked on. And I was going great guns on that for the first 10 days or so, and then unfortunately I just could not keep up the pace. I've not admitted defeat on that, but I have not been able to keep up with the rest of the 100 days project community. I was just trying to do too many things basically. I had committed to do my test knit, and I wanted to do the 100 days project, and obviously I've got work to do as well, and a home to run and family stuff to keep up with, and it was just all too much. So at the moment my 100 days project is on hiatus, so I'm not joining in with the community at the pace that they're working on it. However, I do plan to pick up my 100 days idea later on in the year when I've got a little bit more time, hopefully. So yeah, I ended up weaving for 10 days straight before I realised that I just couldn't keep up with it. And in those 10 days I managed to finish my clasp weft weaving, and I also made a whole bunch of little sort of creative wall hangings really. And I've just brought down a couple to show, and I think I made 5 altogether, but there are just a couple to share with you. I did make a little video. One of the videos that I popped up on Patreon on February was about my first few days of weaving those little mini pieces and also working on my clasp weft. So if you are interested in that and you would like to support the channel and the content that I make, there's a link to my Patreon. If you are able to support in that way, as soon as you sign up, you'll get access to all of the videos that are over there. Before we wrap up the creative section of today's video, I have a teeny tiny little bit of spinning to share with you. And speaking of time crunches, spinning is one thing that did get pushed to the back burner for me in February. I had great plans again of continuing to spin through my Colourful Creativity Fibre Advent. That was one of my 12 cast on projects, and I was hoping to try and spin a bump of fibre every week. But as I said earlier, it's just not possible for me to squeeze everything into all of the days. However, I did get a little bit distracted by a new spin. Again, not one that I've been able to complete, but I went on a lovely little visit to our local lakes and I met up with my dear friend Lisa, and Lisa gifted me some beautiful hand pulled roving that she had blended up on her drum carder. Is a blend of black Welsh Mountain and a mystery blue fibre, which she thinks may or may not be merino. And as luck would have it, on the day that we met, I happened to have a spindle in my bag because I recently purchased this spindle from a D-Stash. Hi Andrea, if you're watching. I love this spindle, and it's from IST Crafts, and I've not had an IST Crafts spindle before, so when I saw that Andrea was D-Stashing this, I had to jump on board and pick it up. And oh, this is just so lovely to spin on. And yeah, I'd happened to put it in my bag to take with me on my little trip to the lake because I was going to start a completely different spin, but then Lisa gifted me this roving and I started spinning it up straight away. But I've run out of room on my spindle now. I have got to the point where it's harder to spin than it should be, so I need to either wind this off or start a new spindle to spin up the rest of this fibre. I'm excited to see how the finished yarn is going to turn out. Lisa said that the sort of blue colour is a bit of a gradient, so I think it sort of starts out strong and then sort of fades away as the roving progresses. So yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how the yarn turns out. I think I'll end up chain plying it to keep the colour progression of that blue fibre. Another quick pause to restoke the fire, and I am starting to melt now. I hope you're enjoying the coziness. This is probably going to be the last fire of the season, to be honest, because it is starting to warm up. Anyway, gifts and acquisitions is the last segment. Obviously I already showed off the pom-poms, which were a gift, showed those off earlier on, but I have got some lovely yarns to share with you and the most amazing knitted gift. So I'm going to start with that. You might remember back the end of January when I did my January wrap up, I was chatting about the fact I was about to go away with a lovely group of friends, and we had an amazing weekend. And I may have put some footage at the start of this video. When I get to do editing, my plan is to try and do a little bit of a sort of peek at my month, a bit like I did for my January wrap up, because a lot of people seem to enjoy that. So you might have seen some footage from our weekend away. But as part of that weekend, we did a little knit swap where everyone was secretly knitting for somebody else. I had the most amazing gift from Ruth, who knit this absolutely stunning cowl for me, and at the risk of me passing out with an extra bit of knitwear, I'm going to pop it on and show you. Oh, I have literally been wearing this non-stop since it was gifted to me, and I'm just going to do a little bit of a close-up for you so you can see the absolute stunning beauty of this piece of knitwear. How gorgeous is that? I am so lucky to have such amazing friends. So the last time we were able to get together in person for our weekend away, we had to skip last year. A few of us were doing a little bit of spinning, and I was helping both Ruth and Charlie along with their spinning journeys. So Ruth said when she was assigned to knit for me, she knew she wanted to include some of her hand spun yarn in a project. So the beautiful contrast colour that you see here is Ruth's hand spun, and it's just absolutely flawless. She's such a beautiful spinner. The pattern is the Auntie's Cowl, because I know some of you will ask. I have been stopped several times while I've been out wearing this, people asking me where I got this from, so sucks for those people that they don't have an amazing friend like Ruth. I will be treasuring that for many years to come. Not only did I get the amazing cowl from Ruth, I also had a beautiful pair of socks gifted to me as well. They're not looking at their best at the moment because I've just been wearing them. And I've just taken them off my feet to show you, so you'll have to excuse the bits of cat hair and the sort of misshapenness of these. But the lovely Charlie, Charlie Button Yarns, Yarn Ambassador, has a circular sock machine, and she cranked us all an amazing pair of socks. So these were my lovely socks from Charlie. I just know the most amazing people. My friends group and the community here. I'm just so thankful for the people that knitting has brought into my life. Also, while we are on the subject of that weekend away, I got some yarn that Ruth was giving away. She popped in our little chat group, she popped up a little message to say, did anyone want a couple of balls of this yarn that she had left over from a project that she'd knit, and it's new Lanark Aran yarn, 90% pure new wool and 10% silk in the shade light graphite. So I jumped at the chance of rehoming this, so I've got sort of 2 full balls, and this has got to be at least 2/3 of a ball, I would say, if not more. And it's a beautiful sort of brown colour with flecks of blue and orange. No one else in our little chat group piped up to say they wanted it, so I was so happy to snag this. And I have an idea. I'd like to weave some fabric for a sort of messenger style bag, and I'm hoping this will be enough to do that, because I think it would make a really beautiful bag. So that's my current plans, but I need to find a bag pattern and figure out sort of dimensions and how much fabric I think I can get from this yarn, but I will definitely find something to make with it because it's absolutely beautiful. Also, as part of that weekend, the lovely Jeanette bought a couple of totes worth of yarn that she was destashing, sort of leftovers and bits and pieces of mostly sort of DK and sort of thicker weight yarn. And in that tote, she had 2 partial balls of Let Lopi, and it's a yarn that I've never used and I really wanted to have a play around with it. So I brought those home. I haven't weighed them or anything. I'm not quite sure how much is there, but certainly enough to play around with. And I'm thinking maybe I would get at least some sort of wrist warmers out of this, if not a pair of mittens, maybe not mittens, I'm not sure. I might have to reverse the colours perhaps if I was to do a colour work pattern, but yeah, I'm really looking forward to just casting on and having a play around with that and seeing if it's a yarn that I think I would like. I've been very curious about the Let Lopi and the Pluto Lopi, but never tried them myself. Oh my goodness, I've been waffling on for so long, my battery ran out, so I'm not sure where I got to or what the camera would have saved. Haven't really got time to check, so let's hope I've got everything. Well, hello! A little visit from Editing Ange, and unfortunately I didn't have everything. The camera basically cut out the section where I was chatting about 2 yarns that I purchased for myself. Well, it cut out one, and then the file for the other bit somehow seemed to have corrupted between me transferring it from camera to computer. But as this video is kind of at the length where I usually like to leave them, then I think I'll chat about those acquisitions next month instead. So I hope you don't mind. Anyway, I have been waffling on for way longer than I intended. Have no idea how long this video is going to be. There's been several stops for me as I threw extra logs on the fire, changed batteries, went to go and get things that I'd forgotten. Usual shenanigans here at Yarn and Yarns. Before I sign off, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone for being here, for watching, for liking, for subscribing. Extra thank you for anyone who has joined over on the Patreon community. I know it's not within everyone's means to be able to support all of the creators that they enjoy watching, or even any of the creators that they enjoy watching. But for anyone who wants to support the content that I make, you can make a regular contribution for Patreon, and in return I post extra videos that are exclusively posted on the Patreon community only. Last month I did my weaving video, and I also did a second instalment in my little Angela's Archive series, as I am calling it, where I revisit some of my knits from the past and chat about the stories behind those knits and how they've worn, and what I think about the yarns and the patterns now that I've lived with those pieces for a little while. I also want to thank, there have been I think 3 folks who have donated some money on coffee over the last 3 months. I think it's been since I last mentioned that. One person specifically said they were donating to help to fund a pattern prize. I've got some prize draws coming up for the 12 cast-ons, so thank you so much. If that was you, you know who you are. I won't mention names just in case. Please, of course, do let me know in the comments below what projects you're working on. What did you finish or work on in February? I really love to hear and be inspired by all of the lovely things that you are all up to. I'm going to be back here again soon. I've got some prize draw videos to do for the 12 cast-ons, so they'll be coming up soon. I've been working on lots of other videos. I'm not sure exactly what will be coming up, but I've got spinning, weaving, knitting, I've got all of the things on the go. So there'll definitely be more content coming up here soon. So, but until we do get to spend time together again, I hope you get to do some of the things that you enjoy. Great big woolly hugs to you all. I'm going to move away from this fire and probably melt into a little bit of a puddle. Might need to take this jumper off for a bit. Things I do for YouTube. Bye for now. Bye.